What is VMware Cloud on AWS? That's what we're talking about today.
If you think about what's happening today for most organizations, they're dealing with a compounding data growth problem. And because of that, a lot of businesses are now saying, how do we become more efficient? How do we manage costs more effectively? And so moving to the cloud and adopting that, organizations are finding more security in that, easier to adopt, easier to manage, and definitely much more cost efficient. There are going to be workloads on premise. There's going to be a hybrid environment where you have workloads in the cloud as well. And when they're looking at this, they're thinking about how do we map their SLAs for data protection to this new environment. And so that's where doing data protection and management in the cloud really becomes part of the full picture.
So Bhaskar, with VMware Cloud being very new, there's obviously a lot of pieces that are coming together. People are trying to understand the various elements, especially when we start adding in data protection into the model. It can seem somewhat complex and people are trying to figure out kind of what do we need to do. Can you step through the major components of it and kind of help folks understand how it all comes together?
No, absolutely, Dave. That's a great question to begin with. So first of all, we have to understand all the components, right? From a traditional view and for the modern view as well. So if you look at this particular box over here, this represents the on-premises architecture, generally, which customers are very used to right now. If I'm a VMware admin, I'll have a vCenter, I'll have a bunch of ESXis which I'm managing right now, and then I have VMs running on top of that. And then if you look at VMC, which is the latest offering from VMware, and it is powered on AWS, what we see is that this vCenter gets extended to cloud, which is running on AWS, and the customers can manage their own ESXis running there, and they can manage their VMs. So they have a single pane of glass, which is their single vCenter, through which they can manage the cloud and the on-premises, which makes an ideal sense, because now if you're trying to expand, and if you do not have capacity right now in your data center, you don't want to open up a new data center, you can obviously go to VMC and leverage this cloud offering from VMware itself.
Right.
To add from a data protection perspective, this adds a bunch of challenges, right? Mm-hmm. Because what you used on premises does not work in cloud necessarily, right? And what happens is, because if you look at from a data protection point of view, the model in the cloud is very different the model which you had on premises, because now you have a challenge wherein you have a single pane of glass, but you cannot have two data protection setups to manage it.
Right, you can get into this kind of bifurcated data protection problem.
Absolutely.
So in a way, you kind of wind up with a bifurcated data protection model if you have to try to do both on-premises and VMC cloud.
Absolutely, and that's the challenge with moving just to cloud, because you had something which you had used for years on-premises. Now you have a newer model, which is cloud. Right. So how do you cope with that? And if you look at Druva model, right, so what we are doing over here is we are giving you a solution which can offer data protection for both on-premises and cloud, which is VMC in specific over here, right? And on top of that, we can offer backup, restore, archival, disaster recovery, and advanced analytics in a single pane of glass itself, which kind of takes away all your multi-vendor solutions which you had till now, and combine them into one single solution for both of your platforms, which you're hoping to use in future itself.
Right, so like vCenter is a single pane of glass, then Druva Data Protection offers a similar pane of glass for the data protection part of your environment.
Absolutely, you got it right, yes.
Okay. So then what about from a technology advantage standpoint? Obviously, a lot of different pieces here, and you've mentioned some of them, but what are some of the big advantages customers would experience?
And I'll start with the backup piece first, because that's the foremost piece, because you're trying to protect data which is on premises or cloud, right? Now, if you look at Druva architecture itself, what we do is if you're trying to back up something which is on premises like VMs, SQL, file servers, NAS, we have a component we call as a proxy, which is a backup proxy, and it can do a lot of things like change block tracking and snapshotting the VMs, making sure they are consistent and all that, and back them up to cloud. Now, we have a similar component available on VMC as well, which has been certified as well. What it does for us is it also just does the same thing, change block tracking, snapshotting, and then back it up to the cloud. Now, there are a couple of benefits over here. Number one is the way these proxies work, they can identify a VM if it has been backed up here on premises, and because of vMotion, you moved the VM to cloud. We know that this VM is already moved, and using the change block tracking, we can back up only the modified bits. So what we are going to back up over here is just a few modified bits or bytes, so if you want to call them.
Right.
And your backups are done much more quicker.
Right.
Same as
So you don't have to do a full backup all over again.
exactly. That's one of the advantages. When we are doing backup, we do something which we call as global deduplication, which means that until now, if you see, dedupe was very specific to a particular site in a traditional legacy world, right? We have changed that notion because of the cloud itself. Now what we can do is, since a backup of a VM has happened from cloud to cloud, and if a backup of a VM happens from on-premises to cloud, and if they have any dedupe blocks, they will dedupe among themselves, which means that now what you're consuming in cloud from a storage perspective, your capacity is much reduced. Also, your backups are quicker, more efficient, and you get all those good benefits of global deduplication.
And if you have multiple sites, it's even more advantageous to you. Right?
Absolutely. So if you had one site, and just imagine like you had 10 sites and you're running on VMC, all the global deduplication expands to all these sites itself.
Okay. What about, recovery? I mean, obviously the big thing is people back up to, hopefully not have to recover, but at some point they're going to want to recover something. How does that fit into the equation here?
A lot of the time, the data protection is only viewed from a backup prism. Like when we look at recovery, recovery has to be very seamless, right? And again, I'm going to point towards the Druva Cloud platform and how we can recover anywhere. Which adds up, like to give you an example, let's say if there's a VM which I backed up, which is backed up from on premises, but let's say I lose a bunch of ESXi servers over here, and I know that I have a capacity over here wherein I can go and recover. So you can go and recover from cloud to your VMC environment directly. And you're not capped by your on-premises bandwidth, you're recovering directly from cloud. By the way, you can recover in multiple ways, right? You can do a full VM recovery, you can do a partial VM recovery, or you can do a file level recovery. So if you just need just a few files and folders and recover it to VMC, by the way, the data was on premises and backed up to cloud, but you are free to recover. Similarly,
with whatever location.
Similarly, if in future anything which has been backed up in cloud, right, and we wish to restore it over here, we can recover as well. One thing I would add over here is sometimes the recovery could be test and dev, sometimes could be production failure. All those use cases are supported because recovery for us is getting the data quickly back to any of the production systems itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I think is the most interesting is just in this environment, getting that kind of universal view so that it doesn't really matter. You just kind of start separating where the workloads are, but what is the data you need to be recovered, right? And then you have instant click, recover that, you're up and going again. But you have all these other options to kind of give you the flexibility based on kind of the situation you're in your environment.
Absolutely.
Right? So another one that comes up is, and one that often gets overlooked is, you're a business, you have a 5-year, 7-year retention cycle, right? A lot of the kind of the more common products look at 90-day windows, right? But a lot of folks are thinking tape and et cetera. How does that get handled in this environment?
A lot of the times if you look at retentions, right, 10 years, 15 years, 25 years, generally it is managed on premises, right? That model was created, excellent model using tapes. People have used it for years and years, and it has been built into their backup software, wherein they will bring in tapes, write to the tapes and offsite it, right, to a vault. What happens when you move to cloud? Because now you don't have a tape in cloud, right? Your requirement is still the same from a retention perspective. You still want to manage or maintain that data for years and years going forward, right? In that case, again, I'll say Druva has been built for that, the way we have auto-tiering features built into our product itself, wherein very easily, if you see the combination of things which Druva uses is S3 plus Glacier, right? So what we can do is very easily, we can tier off data from S3 to Glacier without the need of customer bearing the burden of it. There are options even available today in cloud wherein people will push off to some soft VTL options, but they are not automatically managed. Here you have a single pane of glass which is both for backup and archival. And that's how it's managed. So it doesn't matter whether you're using VMC or on-premises, the logic remains exactly the same.
Right, and you can retain data then for as long as you want.
Absolutely.
And on Glacier, especially very low-cost storage medium. Also, I think pointing out that if you wanted to still do tape, you could, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense to bring it back on premises and then move it off to tape at the end of the day, right?
Absolutely.
It's highly inefficient.
Absolutely. And keep in mind, like all the time when you do a recovery or you're moving data from cloud to on-premises, right? You have to pay a fee.
Right.
There's a data out fee.
Right.
Whereas with Druva, the way pricing has been built, anytime you recover data from Glacier or S3, the pricing is baked into our pricing.
No
itself.
egress charges.
No egress charges from Druva.
Right.
So if in case you are archiving for long term and you want to recover something, it's all baked in pricing.
Right. Last point, obviously something we get asked about often is analytics capabilities. What are your thoughts on that, and kind of what is the benefit to somebody in this environment?
The idea of analytics is here because since it is a single pane of glass, the number one is to give you full analytics around your dedupe capabilities. What dedupe are you achieving right now across your sites? So you could have 10, 15, 20, whatever number of sites you have. If I can see what dedupe I'm getting, that is, and again, global dedupe, so it's very refreshing. The other piece is to identify like my growth, like how my data is growing, how my data is changing.
Rates, right,
exactly. All that information. And finally, I'll conclude it with a good search because you need to search, have a capability to search your data, right? Because if you're having a backup plus archival, you need that search capability itself. Can I go and search a file which is on premises or cloud, irrespective of its location? Can I go and search it very quickly based on a hash or based on the file name itself? Anything which will allow me to do a quick search is located helps me a lot.
Yeah, kind of helps you get around the having to search through multiple catalogs to find something, especially if you're trying to pull something from an archive too,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, so no, that's great. I really appreciate it, Bhaskar, and appreciate your time today. I think that gives everybody a great overview of kind of what's happening in VMware Cloud and kind of the model of data protection Druva is providing in this environment. So thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you.